What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of WWE Untold, entitled Bayley and Sasha Take Over Brooklyn. Of course, as the title suggests, focusing on the Bayley versus Sasha Banks match from TakeOver Brooklyn exactly 5 years ago from when this episode went up last Saturday. Now, I know it's taken me way too long to review this. There's just been so much content going up on the network in the last week or two between Timelines, Untold, 24, Raw Talk, Talking Smack, the R-Truth Game Show, and even more. There's just a lot to get to, which is why you should be subscribed, by the way. I'm reviewing all this content that I just mentioned and much, much more, so be sure to subscribe if you're not already. But back to the episode. I did get a chance to watch this on the anniversary itself. I was really determined to. Just because I was at this match. I was at that show. That was my first ever NXT show, TakeOver Brooklyn 1, and I have such fond memories of the match, the show, the moment of Bayley winning. I had to watch it on the day of. I had to. And I was really happy they put this up on the actual anniversary. They must know what they're doing because they did the exact same thing earlier this year with the Shawn Michaels Kurt Angle match that they also put up on the actual anniversary, I believe, on April 1st, I want to say, of this year, the Friday before WrestleMania. And it was a great fucking match. I mean, it's, again, one of the greatest matches I've ever seen, and this is up there as well. One of the greatest matches I've ever seen, period, if not the greatest match I've ever seen in person, but definitely the greatest women's match in WWE history, in my opinion. My favorite women's match of all time. That kind of goes without saying. But being there obviously puts it on a pedestal for me, and rightfully so. I mean, the match is just that good. But again, like I said, I was really happy they put this up on Saturday. And it could not be more timely just because, they had to take over that same day. Bayley and Sasha right now are doing their thing. They're on the verge of feuding soon, I would imagine. They're just, it's the perfect time to be airing something like this. And on the exact 5-year anniversary, no less, I thought that was really cool. So anyway, they kick this thing off with Bayley. They show a pre-tape promo from her from when she first signed in NXT. A terrible promo, but I mean, she's like, oh, I've always wanted to do this since I was a kid, blah, 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 the typical promo. And they just want to show you the evolution of Bayley, not only as a performer, but as a person, since she first came into WWE back in 2013. She talks about how she loves WWE. She always has. She's always been a diehard fan. And that's why her and Sasha kind of bonded so, not so quickly, because they weren't friends right off the bat. But that's what they had in common. They both loved WWE. Sasha talked about how she fell in love with WWE around the age of 10, and that she knew watching it, that was what she always wanted to do. And Eddie Guerrero was specifically the person who kind of helped draw her in and made her become a big fan of professional wrestling. And she was always really shy about liking it, she said. And I think we can all kind of relate to that. If we were kids growing up, I know I started watching personally in mid-middle school, like 7th, 8th grade. And wrestling wasn't really all that cool back then, so I was kind of shy about liking it and watching it. Bayley, her inspiration was Macho Man Randy Savage, which is why a lot of her gears are inspired by Macho Man. But he was the guy that really drew her in. And of course, she's going back a couple of years here. Sasha started watching, I would assume, in not about the Attitude Era, but probably early 2000s, I would imagine. Bayley has been watching, I would assume, a little longer than her, which is why she was drawn to Macho Man. So for Sasha, Eddie Guerrero helped get her through a lot. She had a really rough childhood, moved around a lot. She has a brother, I believe, with autism. So, she went through a lot of tough times. I don't think her dad is in the picture. Neither is Bayley's, as far as I know. And I'm not exactly sure, but they didn't really talk about their dads here. But they both went through a lot in their respective childhoods. And Eddie Guerrero specifically helped get Sasha through a lot early on. And she still goes back to this day and watches Eddie versus Ray matches. Because of how good they were, they remind her why she's a fan of professional wrestling. And you know what? I don't think this is a stretch when she says that she watches those matches and it makes her think of the relationship that she has with Bayley. And about how, we love each other, but at the end of the day, we both want to be better than the other person. They can go in there and be best friends and be tag team champions, or they can go in there and be heated rivals. That's how great the relationship was between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, as is Bayley and Sasha Banks. And I'm like, you know what? That's actually a really, really good comparison. Now, Rey was always a natural babyface. He never had to turn in any of their feuds. Eddie Guerrero was always the heel in their feuds, just because he could play both sides of the coin. Rey Mysterio, not so much. Bayley's been a heel. Bayley would probably be the Rey Mysterio, and Sasha would be the Eddie. But even Bayley's now a heel, so I'm not even sure if that comparison is accurate. But I really like that comparison, though. And of course she's saying that because she is Sasha Banks and her best friend is Bayley. She's not far off when she says that. I thought that was really interesting that she brought that up, and I don't disagree. So anyway, they show a Sasha Banks promo. They show a Sasha Banks promo from FCW in promo class from September of 2012, right after she signed with WWE. This was right after they made the transition from FCW to NXT. Now, it says FCW. I'm not exactly sure. I can't pinpoint the exact date of when FCW closed. I think FCW was already done by September of 2012. I assume by that point it was already NXT. They didn't have the PC, I know that. That didn't come around until 2013. But Sasha was signed earlier on in 2012, and this was one of her first real promos. And she talked about how she always wanted to do this, and, one of those typical, I've always dreamed of being a wrestler, which very well may be true, and it is for Sasha Banks, but it's one of those basic-ass promos that just goes to show how much she's evolved since then 8 years ago. She talked about how she was really, really excited when she got signed, and she cries a lot on this episode. Bayley comes close. I don't think really she doesn't get as emotional on this episode as Sasha does, but Sasha gets emotional a lot. And, she gets emotional even talking about when she got signed because it was something that she always wanted to do. So she moved to Tampa with her fiance, and she was really, really shy from the get-go. We hear from Sarah Amato, and we don't hear from a lot of people on this episode. We only hear from Sasha, Bayley, Sarah Amato, a.k.a. Sarah Del Rey, and Kevin Owens, which is really random, I know, but he knows both women so well. He came up in NXT with them for a little bit, late 2014, early 2015. It was weird that they had Kevin Owens on the episode, and they didn't have him talk about the fact that he actually headlined that TakeOver Brooklyn show. And I think he's talked about it before, and they did a 24 on TakeOver Brooklyn 5 years ago, right after it aired, right after TakeOver Brooklyn aired. And I think he mentioned they were holy shit, we have to follow this match. Because that same show featured a ladder match from Finn Balor and Kevin Owens. So, and they knew they had to follow that. They were like, holy fuck, what are we going to do to follow this match, So I thought that was funny, but, yeah, no, I was kind of surprised, not extremely shocked, but I was a little surprised they didn't have him talk about that. If there was any other person I would have featured on this episode before we go any further. So they had Owens, Sarah Amato, Sasha Bayley. I think that was it. I don't think we heard from anyone else, which is nice. The less people, the better. They only featured Shawn. I think they featured 4 people on the Shawn Kurt one too from earlier this year. That being Shawn Michaels, Kurt Angle, Michael Cole, and Johnny Gargano, which is random, but he was the fan. He was offering a fan perspective. If they were going to have any 5th person, I would honestly, instead of Kevin Owens, I would have put Indy Hartwell on here. And if that's not a name you should start getting familiar with it because she's really, really good. Very young, but has a lot of potential. She's signed with NXT about a year ago. If you watch the NXT product, you know who I'm talking about because she's been on the show a handful of times in the last number of months. She actually beat, I think, Shotzi Blackheart a couple of months ago, not too long ago. But anyway, she actually got into wrestling. She was already a fan, and I know that because we were following each other on Twitter years earlier. But she started her wrestling training because of Bayley and Sasha. Knowing what they could do, that inspired her to start her own wrestling journey. Literally within 4 years, she was signed by WWE. She's there right now. And she's made it very well known that that was the match that inspired her to become a professional wrestler. So it would have been cool to hear from her perspective as a fan. And Bayley even mentioned that. At the end of the episode, she's like, I hope people watch this match and think that was the match that got me into the business. The same way that Shawn got a lot of people into wrestling back in the day. Bret Hart and many other people. Macho Man Randy Savage for Bayley or Eddie Guerrero for Sasha. They want to be those type of people for future fans wanting to get into professional wrestling. And they literally are in the case of Indy Hartwell, who's there right now. So again, just the nitpick, but it would have been cool to hear from Indy or at least see her or whatever, and then mention the fact that it might be because she's not a huge name so far in NXT. A Johnny Gargano is obviously a very notable name. Indy Hartwell is not for most people, so maybe that's why. But it would have been cool to hear from her. Anyway, so Sarah Amato says that when she saw Sasha in the tryouts and whatnot, she knew that she was a star. Kevin Owens praises Sasha, knew that she was a star as well. Or he knew that she was a star as well as soon as he saw her. And Sasha, I guess, always stood out athletically during the sessions, during the training sessions. She was always very good, very shy, but also very, very good. And Sasha talked about how she initially had to be trained like a diva. They would be in the rings. I want to say this. I mean, Sasha was there. I thought she might have been talking about when she was training to become a professional wrestler, which also very well may be true. But I think she was referring to at the PC, like not at the PC, but like when she first got in NXT, when they would do like cool moves and stuff, the NXT people would come over, like the coaches and whatever. Not a motto, but like other people saying, hey, listen, that's not how you wrestle like a diva. You gotta like slap each other, whatever. What the fuck does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, oh, wrestle like a diva. Don't actually wrestle. And I think, a lot of the matches were so bad back in the day because they weren't trained like actual professional wrestlers. At least if you were in WWE. Like, we give Kelly a lot of shit, the Bellas. But it's not their fault, They're not that... I mean, Kelly just always wasn't that very good. But if they were trained like actual wrestlers, who knows how much better they could have become? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, she's like, fuck that. Like, I'm going to train to be a pro wrestler, not a diva. So she finds out that Davina Rose got hired. And Sarah told her, she was like, oh yeah, we're getting a new crop of women in like January. This was December of 2012. Sarah said, we're getting a new crop of women in the new year in January. I guess which would have been like the second crop of women, like the second generation, whatever, after they already brought in a bunch of people with Sasha in 2012. And Sasha was like, oh, where is she from? And they were in, and Sarah said, oh, from Southern California or whatever. And Sasha goes, oh, is it Davina Rose? And Sarah's like, yeah, how'd you know that? And Sasha was familiar with her, with Bayley's work from the indie scene from before she joined WWE. So she already knew Bayley, like of her work, not as friends. And she knew her as Davina Rose, her name on the independent scene. So Bayley became a part of that second wave of women that was brought into NXT at the onset of 2013. They were told to have a practice match together. They had no time to prepare, so they pretty much called the entire thing in the ring, and it was one of Bayley's favorite matches up to that point because they just gelled so well, despite not having any practice whatsoever. So they ended up bonding over the fact that they were both fans of pro wrestling. A lot of the women they brought in at that point weren't. There were a lot of women, like I would assume like a Summer Rae or a Dana Brooke. They were brought in from being models or bodybuilders. Sasha and Bayley were always wrestling fans. They were always wrestlers. They never came from any other world except for wrestling. They called each other Average Janes because they weren't like, the standout. Not like they're both, pretty women, but in terms of like the gorgeous women they would bring in and that they didn't really have much wrestling experience. And Sasha and Bayley, very down to earth, two very normal people. Not like most of the women they had in NXT at that point. Bayley even said she gave herself 2 months. She thought it wouldn't work out. She's like, listen, I gave myself 2 months here, and if I last any longer, that's great. But I'm miserable. She was miserable for the first month that she was there. And Sasha herself was very scared of being released. She didn't think it would work out either. So both doubted themselves a lot in those early stages of their NXT careers. But they praised Dusty Rhodes, who you gotta bring up. I mean, it's Dusty Rhodes. He brought out the best of a lot of people, including Sasha and Bayley. Dusty believed in that boss character for Sasha. Sasha came up with it. Some higher-ups they don't name weren't too fond of it. Dusty believed in it. He let her roll with it. Bayley, I think that was the name. I think Dusty came up with the name Bayley. I'm pretty sure he came up with that name if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, Dusty was like, just be yourself, baby. Like doing the whole, I can't do a Dusty Rhodes impression, but, he was the mastermind behind that boss character and the lovable Bayley character that we came to know in the years that followed. Kevin Owens talked about how Bayley, she was just such a great babyface. She was such a great character because, she was like, oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to know Triple H, blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, that's Triple H's sledgehammer. No sexual innuendo there, but, she was always the person that was there to be excited and just be a mark, whatever. But it worked because Bayley connected with people on another level, specifically during her entrance. People just loved Bayley because they could see themselves in Bayley. I know that's why I like Bayley. I'm still a Bayley fan, but that's why people enjoyed her so much because she was a realistic character that they could connect to, And both women always went the extra mile to be that much better. Bayley tells this great this great story. It's so funny. So she goes, me and Sasha weren't really tight early on. She asked me to drive her to the PC one day to work one day. Because Sasha, despite having her license, I don't know how long she'd been driving for, probably a while, she was scared to drive on the highway. I mean, who isn't? The highway can be intimidating. But Sasha asks Bayley to drive with her on the highway because Sasha doesn't want to drive. She's scared or whatever. Bayley's like, yeah, sure. So as soon as they get there, though, Bayley, I'm sure Sasha said thanks, but she left to go off with her to be with her other friends at the PC. She didn't hang out with Bayley. And Bayley's like, well, thank you. Like, so much for being friends, I guess. Bayley felt a little slighted by that, which I thought was really funny. I never heard that story before. So yeah, they weren't good friends early on, but they both worked incredibly hard on their characters. And Sasha felt like ultimately it was the universe putting them together. They bonded over being fans, and they were both very similar people, both inside and outside of the ring. So they ended up becoming really close friends. They show a quick graphic, kind of fast-forwarding the process and how they both debuted on TV, Sasha in late 2012, Bayley in 2013. Sasha captured the NXT Women's Championship at TakeOver, Rival? I think it was Rival, right? February of 2015. And Bayley became the number one contender by beating Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch going into that show. So that meant that they were going to be facing off. They were scheduled to face off at TakeOver Brooklyn, the first TakeOver to take place outside of Full Sail, which was a big deal. NXT had done a few house shows and stuff. I don't know if they had done house shows elsewhere outside of Florida. I don't think they did. And the only reason they were running New York was because SummerSlam was there that same weekend at the Barclays Center. And I think initially they were going to run like the little MSG arena or like a part of the Barclays or like a little smaller arena. But when they realized how much interest there was in this show and how much people were willing to pay to be there, they ended up selling out the Barclays Center, which was incredible. For Sasha, it felt like WrestleMania. They were not underestimating the fact, and they were not underplaying how many people were going to be at this thing. They weren't like, oh, it's just another show. It was their WrestleMania. It was this first, easily the biggest NXT show up to that point, with as many people as there were in attendance, the biggest matches and everything else. It was an incredible show. So they could barely do that rehearsal. They could barely do the rehearsal for the match because Sasha had to be a part of an NXT panel that I think is on the network still. They put it up many years ago. It was like with Sasha, Finn, Kevin, Seth, I think was there, maybe one or two other people. And they all talked about NXT. So they could barely rehearse because Sasha was there. And they also never really wanted to practice many of their moves because if they did, they were told by like some of the guy coaches and whatever, oh, you can't do that. You can't do dives. Sasha gets a little reckless sometimes, so I can kind of understand that. But to completely shut down any cool things these women wanted to do, like that reverse Rana, that would have been shitty. And if they practiced it and the guy said no, that match may have been drastically different. So it worked out just even better than it was originally intended to. So Bayley calls the NXT universe just one giant family. And I was there. I was there at that show, so I could attest to the atmosphere on that evening and how great it was and how electric it was in that building. And Sasha said that she could feel the roar from the crowd as soon as, just standing behind the curtain backstage. She could feel that energy. And again, it was an energy like no other. Those entrances were great. Bayley said that she felt cool during her entrance for a change. She almost cried seeing her family in the front row, which I thought was a great moment there because her mom was in the front row. She had been there before for other TakeOver title matches that Bayley had, but she never won. But it was very special for Bayley's mom to be there for this specifically for the match and more importantly, the moment itself of her becoming the women's champion. Sasha said that she got the nerves out even before she came out. She was probably sitting in that SUV, that car that she came out in, screaming to herself, I guess, like, listen, Mercedes, you got to get your shit together. You got to get your shit together. This is the biggest match ever right now. Let's go out there and just fucking do it. I was born to do this, she says. That's what she told herself before she went out. Bayley called it just a real moment. It was just, it was a real moment. Everything that went on in that match and how Bayley had been not disrespected, but she was the character that was like, oh, happy to be here. And people told her for years, oh, you would never succeed. You'll never do this. You'll never do that. And it felt like a real moment when Sasha was legitimately bullying her there in the ring. Not like legitimately, but from a storyline standpoint, she was being a bitch to her. And Bayley had felt that her entire life. So it was a very real moment to her. Very real moment for her to go through that again, specifically in this setting. Bayley was Sasha, who that was who Sasha was originally, and Sasha admits this. She goes, who Bayley is in that moment was who I was when I first walked in the door. But it works more so for Bayley than it does for me because it's not as natural for me. And everyone feels that way, but for certain people it's better. Some people, everyone's a good person for the most part that they bring in. But certain people, like Rollins, is a great guy. He's a really nice guy, but he's just a better heel. just because that's what he's more natural at. Sasha is a much better heel because that's what she's more natural at. She didn't have that same energy, she says, as Bayley did to make that gimmick work. So it worked for Bayley, and the boss character worked for Sasha Banks. Bayley was always told that she wasn't good enough, so to battle back and, do the Hulk Hogan getting fired up spot, whatever, was legit to her. And that was really the story, not only of the match, but of her life, of her entire wrestling career. She looked back at that diving elbow spot, in the corner, not like when she jumped off the top rope, which is what she does now. I don't know if she's talking about this spot specifically or just jumping off the top rope during the elbow. I don't know. But she did this diving elbow here as Sasha was like in the tree of woe or whatever you call it. And she was sitting up and Bayley jumped on the ropes, bounced off, and hit this awesome looking diving elbow. And she was like, that was perfect. And I've done it since then. And I thought, I thought it would be as good, but it hasn't. I really should have stopped there because it hasn't been good. It hasn't been as good since it was in that moment. She thought she hurt Sasha, though. Sasha was just this great professional wrestler that she was just doing a really good job of selling, but Bayley was convinced that she hurt Sasha until she realized, holy shit, she's just selling really, really well. And Banks talks about how it's all about the psychology. If you can get the fans into it, tell this great story in addition to having a great match, from an in-ring standpoint, action-wise, that's what it's all about. And Bayley agrees. Bayley thinks that Sasha being a heel, I think it was Bayley who said this, or Sarah, I think it was Bayley, that Sasha, the little things that she does as a heel are just so great, like the little kicks, the mule kicks, and stomping of the hand in this match, and all the little things make her such a great fucking heel, and specifically in this match. But she thinks that Sasha being that heel was her way of paying tribute to Eddie Guerrero, and how Eddie was always this great lying, cheating, stealing heel, and now she can be that same thing in a different way, which I thought was a great point and a really, really nice thing for her to say. And I'm sure that would mean the world for Sasha to hear that from her own best friend. So anyway, from there, Bayley, they talk about how Banks is good at all the little things, and Sarah Amato said that. And Sasha actually legitimately hurt Bayley's hand again. So Bayley, a lot of people forget, had her hand broken, her wrist or something, a couple of months earlier. She didn't miss any. She may have missed a month of TV. She was at the TakeOver Unstoppable show in a tag team match with Charlotte against Emma and Dana Brooke, but she didn't miss much time. She hurt her wrist. Maybe they did that match because maybe they did the tag team match because Bayley was hurt. I don't know when she got hurt. But anyway, so Bayley was hurt for a little while. She came back just in time for this show. And Sasha put Bayley's hand in between the ring and the steel steps and stomped on the steel steps. That was a real spot because Bayley's hand actually hurt. She thought she broke her hand again. So she was like, holy shit, she had to put ice on it for the rest of the night after that, and maybe the next day as well. Thankfully, I don't think it actually was hurt, but she thought she would have to have surgery again, thinking it was actually hurt because Sasha rather, legitimately hurt her hand. So anyway, so from there they talk about how Bayley actually failed to catch Sasha off a plancha. It was when Bayley was on the outside and Sasha and the referee was like checking on Bayley, but through the ropes. You probably know what spot I'm talking about if you've seen the match a number of times. Sasha jumps over the ropes, jumps over the referee and on top of Bayley. Bayley fails to catch Sasha. I never really noticed that. I never really cared because it still looked so great. I was more focused on Sasha jumping over the top rope. That was really what was more important to me. And Bayley was beating herself up like, oh man, I hurt her, like I didn't catch her, blah, 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 like we fucked that up, whatever. Despite that, though, they still got This Is Awesome chance, and that meant the world to Sasha, because the women never got This Is Awesome chance. Not during any bras and panties matches they ever had, not during any Divas title matches. One of the first real times they got a This Is Awesome chant. That's really fucking cool. Bayley said that she picked the belly-to-belly suplex because I guess there was like a certain amount of finishers they could do, and she picked that one. She's like, hey, listen, if no one else is going to have it, then I will. And then it worked with her character because she would give people hugs. So it's like, oh, I'll continue doing it because it's such a good... It's a perfect finisher. It's a very anticlimactic finisher, but from a character standpoint with a hug thing, it makes sense. She's not doing that anymore because she's a heel, but still. So anyway, Bayley actually fell on her collarbone when she was trying to, I forgot what she was doing. She was trying to do like a Hurricane Rana to Sasha, but she failed, whatever. She ended up doing something similar, the reverse Rana at the end, but she was trying to get Sasha off. She failed and landed right on her fucking collarbone. Almost broke it. And people thought it was a lot worse. It kind of scared her mom in the front row, and why wouldn't it? It was a scary spot. She thought she could have really hurt herself, and she blamed herself for that landing because she wasn't really sure what she was going for. Thankfully, she was okay. So Banks really wanted to do reverse Rana. She always thought she could do it. Bayley didn't want to do it. She had doubts about doing it, but she's like, listen, this match means the world to Sasha. We'll do what she wants. So they just went for it. And they hit it perfectly, and Sasha could have fucking killed herself if she was like a second or two off here. Like an inch or two off. But she didn't. It looked perfect. It was such an oh my god moment. Bayley hits the finisher and wins the match, becomes the all-new NXT Women's Champion, and that reaction was unbelievable. She started crying after she saw her mom crying, Sasha was crying, she starts crying, Rollins had a tear in his eyes. Seth freaking Rollins, the Monday Night Messiah, watching from ringside, had a tear in his eye, clapping while standing up. That was really cool. That was really cool. Banks felt that the crowd stopped in that moment just so she could have that chance to hug Bayley afterward, have that 4 horsewoman pose. Becky was out there, Charlotte was out there. Oh, they broke the 4th wall. Who gives a shit? It was an amazing moment. People will remember that forever. I don't know if I would put it on the same level as the curtain call from Madison Square Garden in '96, but it's up there. A fellow iconic New York moment. It was really, really cool. Great way to close this thing out. And yeah, they had a rematch, the Iron Woman rematch, where Bayley and Sasha hated each other again out of nowhere. But for this moment, people knew what the deal was. They know that it's not real. No one really cared. It was just such a great moment. They walked backstage, this huge ovation from all the producers, Triple H, the wrestlers. It was so fucking cool. It was so, so cool. And they started hugging each other backstage, and they talked to each other real briefly. And Bayley says that she was really happy that she could have that moment with Sasha. And Triple H hugged the both of them like he was like their father. He picked both of them up and said how proud of them. You can tell just by looking at the guy how much that match meant to him as well, watching from backstage. He was like, holy shit, that match was amazing. And he's like, I got to go back to work, but I really want to just tell you guys I'm proud of you. Like, holy shit, that match was great. Like, he was beaming from ear to ear here, which was so cool. And, so Sasha talks about her brother and how he actually likes when she loses. She doesn't explain why, but apparently her brother really likes when Sasha loses. So he was really happy about that. He was smiling. They took all pictures together, which was cool. Sasha was really happy that her mom was there for it, that Bayley's mom was there for it. They took a picture all together, which was cool. And she's really thankful that she gets to live her dream, that her mom let her live her dream and become a pro wrestler. Because her mom was very skeptical early on, like, oh, why would you want to do the bras and panties thing? Like, why would you want to do that? And now I don't know if her mom gets it now, but, she's really thankful that her mom let her do it and let her live out her dream, and now it paid off. And Sasha talked about the power of a dream and how important that is. And that was the end of the episode. So again, I came close to shedding a tear at a few different points. This was really, really good stuff. Bayley was awesome here. I mean, the entire match is amazing. Go back and watch the match if you haven't seen it in a while. But the special itself, clocking in at around 38 minutes, well worth the time. It's so fucking good. It's so, so good. The match itself was amazing. And if you already watched the match recently, check this out as well. If you already seen it, go watch it again. That's how good this was. I cannot praise it enough. One of my favorite Untolds in some time. Again, partly because I was there for the match, so I am biased, but it was really, really good. And I'm looking forward to the eventual rematch on the main roster. But anyway, guys, thank you for checking out this episode of Untold, entitled Bayley and Sasha Take Over Brooklyn. It was great stuff. More content review, more network content review coming here to the channel in the days to come, including, I believe, either tomorrow or Sunday. I'll be breaking down the Show Must Go On episode of WWE 24, focusing on WrestleMania 36 and how they had to run in the Empty Arena Performance Center, the Empty Arena WrestleMania. And they talk all about that, and I'm looking forward to watching that and reviewing it here on the channel in the next couple of days. So be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content like that, more content like this, and more daily content just in general. Be sure to check out my Untold reviews in the description box down below. Be sure to hit that little bell button to be notified every time a new video goes up. And yeah, that's about it, guys. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy Payback on Sunday. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.